guys, we're here. Just a couple of minutes and we will get started. Hi, Laurie. Hey, Carolyn. Who did I miss? Hey. I see 4 people are popping in. Hi, Misty. It's not morning here, Carolyn. It's afternoon. Marlis, hey. I'll lose track of those names in a second. Hey. Alrighty. It is 1 o'clock, so we're gonna start. I like being prompt. It's a little obsession of mine. Okay, as you can see, I did the background last night. Totally went in a different direction because that's what I do. I have the best made plans and then I just go somewhere else. So what about this background? What did I use here? These are deli sheets. I can't even talk. It's this waxy paper that they use in delicatessens to keep food from sticking to it. Oh, here's my reminder note. Not to let you guys let your pets drink the plaster water. Do not let your cats or dogs drink out of that plaster water, okay? Remember what that stuff does, it hardens. You do not want it to get into their systems. Okay, I remembered that. Okay, back to the deli paper. You can buy this in big containers on Amazon. It is very inexpensive. It's wonderful stuff because it's transparent right now, or translucent. When you put it on something and you use your gel medium or your glue or whatever it is that you're going to use to adhere, it becomes totally invisible. All you're going to see is the paint. And if you tear it, you're not going to see the edges of the paper. I can always keep deli paper around, and sometimes I use my jelly plate to make prints to use for collages or whatever. This is the piece that I used for the background of this. It was two-sided. When I'm wiping off my brushes, when I'm wiping off stencils, and I have excess material, paint, whatever on there, then I use my deli paper and I wipe it on that and I throw it in a big container and I use that later on. It is great stuff. And if you use your stencils, like if you're using a molding paste with your stencils and then you clean your stencils off on the paper, you've got that added texture on there, which is really cool. So this is just some examples of that. You can use both sides. If you paint the back side of it, then you will see what's on the front side of it even more. It'll stand out more. And this is just a sheet of some kind of paper. I don't even know what it is. Some waxy paper that I just used to clean off brushes and things with back at school. I save everything. Anyway, so those are great, and that's what I used here. And I put it down with a matte medium. And I do want to say, excuse my hands this morning. I have been on a kick of dumping things all over myself. I broke a jar of ink, black ink all over the floor, hence the black here. And I've been working on some stuff with liquid paint, really liquid stuff, so my hands are horrible. So sorry about that. Anyway, back to this. Notice that in here, I know this area in here is where my text is going to go. So I tried to keep that with less of a pattern there so that my text would stand out more. And I really, and you'll notice it gets busier up and around here. I wasn't sure where I was going to put foliage, so I went ahead and collaged everything on there just so it was done, because who knows what I'll do. I do want this to be a little bit lighter though, so the trick that I have found, hopefully it works, is I'm going to use a little bit of gesso, and I'm going to use a very light coat, and then I'm going to wipe it away. I just want to make this a little bit more serene. So, but I still want to see the color coming through, so I don't want, luckily this is a very cheap gesso, so it doesn't go on very heavy anyway, so it's perfect for what I'm using here. Okay, this is the area that I'm going to have my text in, so I'm just going to come back and I'm just going to kind of wipe away. And you may have to build it up a little bit. You know, maybe that wasn't enough, so I'm going to put more on here. Dab it. This background is pretty light, so it's not just something that I have to do. I can let that sit for a minute and then come back when it's a little bit dried and remove more. So that's a good trick that I always tend to use in the areas where I want my text to go. So, or if you've got a background, like Carolyn had a background that she felt was way too dark. So I suggested to her that she use the gesso over whatever areas she felt were too dark, and then either rub it out or not put it over areas she wanted to keep. Okay, so the tree. You may have found, some of you, as your tree dried, that the tree came loose from your canvas. That is totally normal, and I forgot to mention it yesterday. Not a big deal at all. Adding your background will take care of that issue. When I came in here with my matte gel, putting my papers down, I made sure that my gel went right up to the edges of my tree. And what that did, that adhered my tree down here. And when we add the glue on here for our textures, that's another way of keeping it down. You just want to make sure your edges are down now. Let's see. Okay, yeah, let's dry it a little bit. Hands and everything else. I might as well have them on here too, right? Okay. Now I could continue to do layers of that, but I'm not. This is pretty light, and I know I'm going to use a black paint for when I do my text on there, so I'm not worried about it really showing up. But if I get to that point, then I can always add some more white in there if I want to do that. Okay, so texture to our trees. I took my Elmer's glue, and I just have an old container, food container, and I watered it down. All right. This is probably a little runny, but it's okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it on my tree trunk. And then I'm going to sprinkle the materials over that. And I decided that what I was going to use was not the big chunks of eggshells, but the smaller pieces. And this sawdust, which I really like, and I wish I'd thought to collect more of it. But I'm sure she'll be making something else I can collect. So, without further ado, let's try that. I have brushes that are less expensive than others. Actually, I abuse all my brushes, so it really doesn't matter, but I'm just going to paint it on there. And I'm just wiping that glue off if it gets onto the paper, collage paper. just because the glue tends to dry more of a gloss, and I don't want a gloss on my background. I want it matte. And depending on your climate, this may dry quickly or not. That's another thing I noticed this morning. My tree was not really all the way dry. The way you're going to know that your plaster is dry, as it dries, it gets cold. And when it is completely dry, it will be room temperature. So that's how you're going to know that your plaster has cured. Okay. Okay, that's on there, so let's give it a shot here. I'm not trying to get it solid. I just want to get some texture on here. Okay, I'm going to just continue on up. And as I work my way up the tree, what I'll be doing is I will start to mix some of the sawdust in with the eggshells right around in here. Now, if you see that you want more texture, then when this is dry, go back and add some more. See, I'm kind of sprinkling it down here too. And trees don't abruptly change textures right in the middle of things. You just see it more as we go up the tree. Or say as we go down the tree, I should say. Okay. And what I'm going to do when I get all this on here and it has dried, with my textures on here and dried, what I'm going to do is go over it with another coat of glue, just to kind of seal it on there, because what I'll do after I get it, and a hair, imagine that, I will go through and I will dry brush onto the top of it, and so that texture will really pop. I don't want the texture to absorb the paint. I want the texture to, I want the paint to just go on the top of the texture and show it. If that makes any sense. Okay. I notice it's getting on my background. Well, when I finish this, I'm going to take my canvas and I'm going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to let that stuff, the excess, fall out onto my table. And then later on, I will brush that off. After I get this done and I brush this stuff off, at that point I can actually, I think this is going to be dry here, I can start doing a little bit of shading maybe in my background. Lose track of where I put the glue. Of course, another. Oh my gosh. This is the downside to having 4 cats in the studio. You know, I love them, but you know, a little cat fur goes on everything that I create out here. And I know some of you have exactly the same issues. Oops, get a mess there. And if I wanted to in my background, if I felt that all of it's just too much, then I can always go through and I can gesso over things. I can, you know, I can paint. I can do whatever I want because it's, you know, it's your background. If you decided you do not want text on your background, then go with those dark colors. Or, of course, you could, conversely, you could also use a white paint to put your text on there instead of a black, and that would stand out. So it's just whatever does it for you. I guess I love trees so much, always have, because no two trees are exactly alike, and you know, they're just awesome. And no matter how twisted and gnarly and whatever they go, they are, they're all, we always think they're pretty, you know. So let's kind of relate that to people. Just let people be who they are. It's like trees, we're all beautiful. Especially right now, because probably half of us, you know, probably more than half, if you're staying at home right now with the virus, if you're stuck at home and working from home, you probably have your pajamas on and a bra. You know, if you're a guy, you haven't shaved in a week, who knows? It's going to be culture shock when this is over and we have to go back to work. But there are positives. Just think of all this time that we've had to work on our art. Okay, so I'm gonna let that set for just a second. Make sure you put your brush in water. And if you've got the dropsies like I do today, put the lid on the glue. Put the containers of sand or whatever you've got out of your way before you knock them off, which I will do. Okay, let's see here. All right. Okay, awesome. Kind of brush that off, make sure that's off my background. I'll use a wet wipe. And that was another thing that I thought about using was a wet, I always keep my wet wipes that I wipe paint on. They're a little bit sturdier than paper towels, so I tend to use them most. But I keep them. I have this huge container full of wet wipes, painted wet wipes. And by golly, one of these days I'm going to actually use them. Not sure for what, some kind of collage. Okay. Alrighty. That didn't get very white in here. I do have my white, titanium white, golden, so I'm just going to give it a shot of just putting a little bit of that there. Kind of rubbing it in. Yeah, that gesso that I had is just not the best. It's just cheap gesso, which is fine for what I usually use it for. But for this, if you're trying to cover something, you need some better coverage, and maybe white paint will do a better job for you, depending on the quality of your gesso. Okay. Again, I may continue to go back and do more. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to shade around my tree. I know that this is dimensional right now, but I want it to be even more dimensional, so I'm going to do some shading. And for that, I'm going to use the Golden Shading Gray. It's the High Flow Acrylic. And I have this dioxazine, I have no idea if I said that right or not, golden, the purple, and I'm going to add just a tiny bit to this gray. Since I have purples here, you can kind of pick up. Doing this. See my plate, you can tell that I use this all the time, and eventually I will probably cut the plate up and use it for something. Okay. Okie dokie. Let's see what we got here. Just add a little bit of that purple in there, mix it up really good. Okay. And again, you can wipe off. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not leaving it like that, right? Okay. But I'm going to go ahead, you can see that hint of purple on there. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry for just a second though. You can see up here how it's starting to dry a little more transparent. Now I have a tendency to use my fingers. That's why another reason I have wet wipes all over the place. I'm just kind of blending that in with my finger, the outer edge, so I don't have that line. Don't want lines. Okay, see how much better that looks? And it's like, oh, I have a shadow there for the first time. How cool. Now, I don't know that I'm going to continue this all the way up because, again, I'm not really sure what I'm going to use for my foliage yet, so that may be covered up. I don't know, but I know that down here, this is probably going to be showing, so I'm going to go ahead and add it here. And if I want that shadow to be more pronounced, I could have added some black in there. I can go back and I can add more layers of the shading. And right here, I know this is going to be a little more shaded in here, so I'm actually bringing my shading out a little bit. I know that right in here, my tree. Can you see that the difference that that makes already? It's really kind of magical. So let's try it here. I'm not going to subject you to spending the entire time and sitting here watching me do that or this, but I just wanted you to see a little bit of it. So sure what that shading gray has in it. It's not just a straight paint. I think it's got a little bit of a gel in there of some sort that makes it a little bit easier to do this with. Okay, so I know in there that's going to be more shaded in these little parts here. So that's what you're going to do. Can you use something besides the shading gray to do your shading? Well, sure you can. You could, you know, try Prussian blue if you're using blue tones. I love Prussian blue. It's a good alternative to stark black. I love Prussian blue. Or your dioxazine purple, whatever, and just make sure that it's watered down and that you blend it in with your fingers. So that's what we got today, and that's really as much as I can do today because this all has to dry. Okay, it all has to dry. So what you need to do tonight, if you're staying up with me, is go ahead and add your textures to your tree trunk. Make sure that you've got your, whatever background you've chosen. It doesn't matter what you've chosen. It's up to you totally. But if you've going to do one, then put a background on there. If you choose to do shading, add your shading. If you want an area left lighter for your text, then make sure you lighten that up. Okay? So there we go for today. This was a short and sweet one, but I've seen Carolyn's tree so far, and it looks wonderful. So I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody else's. And I've decided that I'm just going to keep doing trees until this quarantine thing is over, because every one of them is so distinct and different. And I want to try some new things, maybe using that Tyvek for the trunk. I don't know. Who knows? So anyway, stay home, stay safe, and keep creating. Bye. See you tomorrow.